All right. Shall we begin today, Amy?
Yes.
Wonderful. A warm welcome to you, Amy. I'm really looking forward for this wonderful, discussion with you because, this is something as a topic which I always feel is, people need to know to understand, how a book can be really crafted so well. A lot depends on indexing because that's kind of a ready reckoner. So, very excited today to hear a lot of things from you, Amy. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, me too.
Great. So let me just start for the sake of everyone a little bit about Amy, with your kind permission, Amy.
Sure.
So Amy Hall is a professional freelance book indexer with specialties in the areas of cookbooks, learning and development, social psychology, wow, criminal justice, sports, and health issues. She has been a member of this American Society for Indexing since 2006 and was elected to the ASI's Board of Directors in 2022. She holds a BS in advertising from San Jose State University's College of Journalism and Mass Communications and is also a graduate of the USDA indexing course. Amazing. Emmy was the indexer for two James Beard Award finalists 2023, Independent Publisher Book Awards Gold Medal winner 2020, National Book Award for Nonfiction First Place winner 2017, an IACP Cookbook Award for the first place as a winner in 2016, and the James Beard Award finalist 2016. Quite amazing, Amy. She was the featured presenter for the three-part American Society for Indexing online learning webinar, which was on culinary indexing, food for thought, wow, and has written several published articles about book indexing. Wonderful, Amy, absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Amy. A big round of applause for Amy.
Thank you.
This is so lovely to know all this really because it is such a interesting topic really. Any thoughts, any opening thoughts, Amy, before we deep further again?
I love what I do. Okay.
Hmm.
I really enjoy it. It's kind of a dream to be able to read for a living.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So thank you again, everyone who has joined in today. And we are recording this session, so we will be able to send it to a lot of people after the session as well. So let me start with the questions, Amy, with your kind permission.
Mhm.
Okay. So here we go. This is, the book indexing entire journey. If we can understand in your own words, what exactly is book indexing?
So book indexing is writing a guide to accompany a book's text. It's not a summary, it's not an overview of the text or of the particular topic at all. It's breaking down the text that the author's already written. You're showing the hierarchy of concepts presented in the book. And because you're doing that, it's important to remember that you're not adding any new information.
Sure.
You're just making all the information that's already in there accessible to readers. They have to know how to find it.
Sure. So just a further question on that, depends on a lot of genres. Where does it work the best in terms of indexing?
Tell me more about what you
Is
mean by
it a particular type of content which works very good for indexing, or is it generally applicable for any kind?
Yes. So it's almost always nonfiction.
Okay.
Very, very rare to find fiction indexed. Just a handful of books, really. And the different kinds of nonfiction books, there are trade books, which are the books that you'd find if you walked into a bookstore, books
Sure.
you'd find in your local library, versus scholarly books that are put out by university presses, books used by professors, written by professors. But the only books that I work with are the trade books, the ones that you're going to find in your local bookstore, written for lay people.
Sure. Sounds good. So how did you really first discover the world of book indexing? Where did where did the heart move? Where did the mind move? How did you land up in that?
That's a good question. I used to work as an editor in a high-tech research lab,
Sure.
and I'd always been kind of good at that work. I I figured I could do something like that again. So
Right.
I'm a pretty fast reader, and I have a really good eye for spotting things like errors and inconsistencies and stuff. So I was looking for something that I could do from home and part-time, because I had young kids. And I researched, and I came across indexing, and I found a self-paced course through the US Department of Agriculture, and it was terrific.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it took a little while to get the first job and such, just kept trying. I joined the American Society for Indexing, and becoming part of a professional organization really helps.
So
Um,
that's
yeah,
how it all started.
that's how it started.
Lovely. So what inspired you to really pursue a career as a freelance book indexer? Because, I'm sure you are meeting a lot of people. So how is the journey of a freelancer coming up now?
Well, most book indexers are freelancers, which is interesting. I didn't know that when I was going to start, and I think that's kind of unique in any sort of business.
Hmm.
There are some kinds of indexers who work for big corporations, but they tend to be like medical indexers or legal indexers. They're working on really specific work, and
Hmm.
there's different kinds of rules for that.
Right.
Um, so the advantage of freelancing is that you can dip in and out of it, depending on what's going on in your life to some extent. But
So,
the downside is if you're not taking in work, you may get overlooked on the list of freelancers in the future. And
hmm,
also, if you're freelancing, you're not getting corporate benefits. Um,
of course.
so you have to pick and choose.
Sure, sure. Yeah, but that's interesting to know when you say that, most of the, indexers are freelancers, you said. Yeah. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's an eye-opener, really. So could you walk us through some kind of a process which I'm sure you are, following from start to finish? How do you go about doing your work? I mean, how does it work?
Well, I'd back up and I'd say the very first thing is landing the job.
Uh-huh.
And that can be anywhere from several months to 5 minutes before the job starts. And
Sure,
for me personally, it seems to be a lot closer to 5 minutes.
sure.
So I get a file attached to an email, and the production editor says, "Are you available to index this book?" And then I take a glance at it, and then I decide. But once we get past that part, when I get the PDF, um, I skim through it pretty quickly to get a feel for the format and the structure of the book.
Hmm.
I read the table of contents. I skim to see the layout of the book. Um, Most of the time, when the book is ready for indexing, it's at what's called the second pass stage.
Hmm.
And that means that the text and the graphics have already been formatted. It looks exactly as it will when the book is in the reader's hands. Um, so the book will be proofread again by the editor, but it's actually pretty rare to find a mistake or a typo or something like that. Once in a while, there will be a question for the author in the text, but that's usually just in a cookbook.
Hmm.
Um, some to many indexers read through the entire book before they start indexing, and then they mark up the text as they go, like on a tablet.
Sure.
But I don't do that. And also some indexers, they work on the content chapters and then they go back to do the introduction after the fact. But
Hmm.
I don't do that either. So I just work straight through.
Hmm.
Um, I have two very wide monitors on my desk. It's about
Wow.
4 feet of space, of screen space. It's really helpful because then I can have, my indexing software open, my PDF, my, another window to search for things. So I have plenty of room for multiple windows to be open at the same time.
Sure.
Um, I use indexing software for like alphabetizing and for sorting, but
Hmm.
as far as coming up with the specific terms, that's all on me.
Of course.
Um, some of those terms are standalone. They don't have subheadings below them. Um, in particular, people's names, other proper nouns, things like that. Unless it's a biography or something, and then you'd say, marriage, death, education, those kinds of subheadings.
Sure.
in general, for the kinds of books that I do, I don't like to go below one subheading level. But in a scholarly or a technical book, it wouldn't be uncommon to have 2, 3 levels as
Mhm.
subheading. So it can be very, very detailed. After I've gone through everything, I I sometimes want to go back and revisit some of the entries that I've written, happy like with their phrasing or something, and I clean that up. I proofread, I spell check, and then I send the client a Word file with the index, and
Okay.
it's sent as a single column file. And then they have their designer drop it in, and they just have to make sure that it's kept straight with the indents and such.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Wow. Quite a very scientific process, I must say. It looks so simple for people to have a look at these, indexes, but there is a lot of work which goes into it. So yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
So like how much does technology play a good part into it? Like how has technology changed the way you have approached indexing in all these years, maybe about 20 years of your fantastic career?
You know what? It actually hasn't changed that much.
Uh,
So the same tools have always been there as long as
mhm.
I've been working in indexing. So indexing software hasn't particularly changed. It's been updated, but beyond that, the browsing and searching, that kind of thing. I'm seeing a little bit more of the same topics addressed by different authors. So, for example, every book has an entry about COVID-19.
Oh yeah.
Um, there's a lot of similar references to gender issues, that kind of thing. But
Mm.
I mean, you wouldn't say that that's the influence of technology.
So,
Um, a number of years ago, there was a prediction that ebooks were going to take over and the print world was dead, but obviously that never happened, fortunately.
yeah.
Um, One thing that did change in the last several years was I used to get the books in hard copy along with the PDF. So
Mhm.
the big publishers, they print out each page on these single-sided big sheets and they'd mail them to me. And it was kind of easy to work for them, especially for a cookbook. Uh,
Right.
but but they stopped sending those completely because everybody, the editors, they started working from home because of COVID. So now it's just completely on. It's funny that almost all of my clients I have never met or even spoken to.
Wow.
Almost everything is done through email for me. Maybe it's not that way for everybody, but it's not uncommon at all that I have never spoken to most of my
Wow.
clients.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
I mean,
Really.
that's great that you can do it all through email.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are
Yeah,
using technology to the best of its ability, really. Fantastic. Okay. So how to decide which topics or terms to include? This is a very, very crucial, question, Amy, because people, after reading the book, they see a lot of information in the index pages. But who decides that? Is it the publisher? Is it the author? Is it you, or is it a mix of all three?
that's a good question.
Yeah.
Um, it should be me. It is me.
Okay.
um, there are some publishers that like to provide a word list or a topic list or something like, please make sure these are included in the index. I personally have not really had that experience.
Okay.
Um, so so a lot of how I decide what goes in the index comes from my own personal experience. So there are certain topics that I index frequently, wellness, cookbooks, learning and development, those kinds of topics I index all the time. So I'm
Hmm.
really familiar with the terminology, and I have sort of favorite phrases and groupings that I like to use.
Sure.
So I know about a lot of different like foods and cultures, for example. So I don't usually encounter something that's really unfamiliar to me.
Hmm.
Um, but but really the most important thing to recognize is who is the audience, who is going to be reading this book.
Yeah.
And that's part of why the author should not be writing the index beyond the technical part of that. It's kind of like uh, a lawyer is capable of defending himself, but it's really not a good idea if a lawyer defends himself. So in a similar way, the author is kind of too close to the work.
Mm,
He takes things for granted that he's been working with for a long time. So
sure.
I need to say, how will somebody look for something before they give up? We don't want them to give up and put
Mm,
the book back. So let's say it's a book on depression.
mm,
Um, so readers are going to be looking for information on treatments, therapy, medication, that kind of thing.
sure.
Um, but there also need to be entries about reading resources and important doctors and their research. But say the book is only about a specific new non-medical treatment. If there's no mention of prescription drugs in that text, then the topic does not belong in the index.
Mm, mm,
So again, it's really important that you not rewrite what's in the book and put something in the book that isn't there.
sure, sure. It's
Yeah.
wonderful. Very, very crucial to understand this because, who decides was always a question on top of my mind, and you've answered it perfectly. So, what's one common misconception which you have noticed, about book indexing people generally have?
Um, I think people think that it's generated by computer.
Huh?
Um, and there is something called a concordance, which is like a list of terms in the text, but that's not really helpful like a real index. It doesn't, it shows, what pages specific words are on, but
Hmm.
that's not always getting the gist of a topic. And um, it doesn't show hierarchy. And you can't particularly use AI to generate an index that's going to be helpful or accurate.
Hmm.
There's kind of a common sense that's instinctual, and you have to you need that human quality to really
Sure.
understand that. So like as an example, like 50, 75 years ago, it might have been appropriate to use a term like apparel when you're talking about fashion. But nowadays, nobody would ever look for that. And
Hmm.
while, it may be in the dictionary, so maybe AI could find something like that, it's just not right.
Wow. Yeah. So as you say this, what comes to my mind really is, more about people need to understand the consumer behavior today, the reader very well before you do the indexing. And I think that can only come with someone like you, who's an expert in this line. So no technology can aid. Of course, it will aid,
Yes. Yes.
but ultimately it is a creative work, and unless you don't get underneath the skin of the genre or the book title, you'll not be able to index it the way you can do it. So I think this is a great answer, and a lot of people would be very happy to hear this. So can you share an instance actually, where indexing felt more like a detective work? Oh goodness me, was it a Sherlock Holmes kind of a situation for you ever?
Um, I would say proper names are often a really big challenge
Hmm.
because sometimes they're spelled incorrectly or they're used inconsistently within a book. So names in general are a huge issue for indexers. Uh,
Hmm.
there are good, there are really specific rules about how you invert them. You switch them around the last name, first name. It depends on the language and the context. So in some languages, you invert after a definite article. Other languages you don't. There's rules about royalty, fictitious character names. So like Charlie Brown from Peanuts,
Yeah.
he goes under C for Charlie, not Brown. Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Even show dogs, they have these official names and then they have their casual names that their
Mm.
trainers might call them. So there's rules about everything. There's rules about pen names and maiden names and when something is anonymous. So I would say names are one of the things that you spend the most time on. It can take a lot of research to get it right.
Sure, sure. Okay. Yeah, I think it's very important to understand all these aspects really. So in terms of, very complex work which you must have got sometimes, So I'm sure there are few which are cakewalks for you, because you've done that genres repeatedly, as you keep saying, learning and development, for example, or cookbooks. You're very familiar with it. But sometimes a very complex books comes in. So how do you stay focused on that?
Um, I think it's a kind of a matter of planning more than anything else. So I keep a hard copy grid calendar on my desk,
Mhm.
and I put in the dates when I'm going to receive work and when it's due. And then I can see I have 10 days, 20 days, whatever to fit this in. I've got 3 projects going on at the same time. And I just see, well, I have to do this many pages at a time.
So,
I keep track of the percentage of a book that I've completed,
mhm.
and sometimes like a tally of the work sessions that I put in, so that I feel like I've done something.
Wow.
There are times when I'm working on multiple projects in a day or a week, and there are the times when I'm not.
Mhm.
Also, just the nature of this and freelancing, it can be very feast or famine. Like you can be very busy and very, available. It really just it's all over the place, and that does make it kind of interesting, actually.
Yeah. Okay. So, Amy, very keen to know. I mean, there would be hundreds and thousands and, hundreds and thousands of words which must be, really indexing. But any complex term which you have come across, you recollect, or maybe terms which you have recollect, and it was like, oh gosh, this is something which I really need to put my head into. Have you come across any such terms? Anything which comes to your mind from any of the titles which you have done?
The terms or the type of book.
Yeah, the terms.
Um, I had this really cool meta moment when I was working on one of Chuck Klosterman's books.
Uh-huh.
He writes about kind of pop culture type things, and it was the second one of his books that I was indexing. And in the introduction, he went on for at least a paragraph talking about the indexes in his own books. So in that book, there was an entry about the lyrical quality of his indexes, and I thought that was kind of cool.
Okay. Okay. So, in terms of not falling into a particular routine, how do you keep yourself on a lighter side, maybe, but how do you keep yourself fresh and looking forward for for always new work? I'm sure this must be getting into a kind of a typical mindset which you go through. So, how do you keep yourself fresh for all this?
Um, I'd say there almost is no routine, so I don't have to worry about that because it's not like I do the same thing every day.
So,
I get different books on different topics all the time, so it's not like I'm bored of that.
mhm.
And again, because the workload varies considerably, some months are really busy and some are not. So I feel like I don't have that problem too much.
Uh, that's good because despite we all are into a creative line. Publishing ultimately books is all about a creative work which actually takes a shape into a particular media. It's very important to stay fresh and even if you are doing the same
Right,
thing, it's
right.
as long as you're not falling into the routine trap. I think the best will always come out of us. That's for sure. But it could be a case sometimes, Amy, that you come across something very unfamiliar which you have not done in the past, and you have a request to do it. And you have declined it at the first stage, but then sometimes you must not have. So have you come across a situation where, oh God, what have I done? Or maybe now I need to really crack this. Is there a situation that you have faced any time?
So if it's a subject that I know nothing about, and it doesn't happen that often, um, I look at something like Wikipedia or Google and I get a basic understanding of it. Those two resources are fantastic for that kind of thing. Um, a few times I've turned down work because it was something so out of my league that I knew there was no way I could do it, like, a high level math book or a religious text that I was just completely unfamiliar with, and I knew I wouldn't do a good job.
Yeah.
Um, in my group, we refer work to each other when somebody else is more qualified. So
Mhm. Okay. Okay. But I'm sure there would be some kind of eureka moments, when you took up something very challenging and you probably hit a wall, couldn't crack it, but then suddenly something happened. Any situation which comes to your mind of this kind?
Um, I would say my eureka moments really come from my own side of like, I'm having trouble um, working on the index in terms of like, I'm not happy with the phrasing or I'm not happy with um, the term I'm using, something like that. And
Mhm.
so I have actually had a lot of moments in the shower where I get like a great idea of, well, that's how I should handle it. And it's pretty cool because your brain is relaxed and so you can think creatively in those
Sure.
situations.
Mhm.
Um, this kind of work, the indexing work, is really intellectually taxing. So
Mhm.
I can't like sit at the computer for 8 hours and do it. I mean, I just don't.
Sure.
Excuse me. So I have a lot of breaks in my workday and I do other things or I take a walk and really that sort of relaxing my brain helps me like think
Hmm.
about things and understand something a little bit better.
Sure. Sure. Okay. So in your experience, how does a well-crafted index page, index maybe work, which you do? Let me just get this question right. Um, how does a well-indexed book contribute to its overall success? How does it work?
Um, well, first off, in my opinion, um, cookbooks require a well-written index more than pretty much any other book.
Hmm.
Um, because when somebody is browsing in a bookstore, or even if they're looking on Amazon and doing the look inside kind of feature there, they
Hmm.
flip to the index. They look to see what kind of recipes are included, and
Hmm.
they will actually put back a cookbook. If they're in the bookstore, they'll put it back, or
Hmm.
Amazon, they won't purchase it if it's not indexed well, if they can't find what they're looking for. So cookbooks are used in two different ways. So it's somebody looking just for general inspiration,
Hmm.
or they are looking for finding information. Like, I have all these carrots. What should I make with them? Um,
Hmm.
so a good index will satisfy both kinds of
Sure.
search. There are plenty of books that do not contain indexes. Maybe not plenty. Okay, there are too many that do not contain indexes.
Sure.
One that I have seen a fair amount are memoirs, especially those really big ones like Barbara Streisand. 1,000-page book and she has no index. Uh,
Wow.
Mel Brooks, similar, similar kind of thing. Um, Prince Harry's book Spare that came out last
Yeah.
year,
Yeah.
no index. And
Really?
there's actually a few different reasons for that.
Hmm.
Sometimes they did not allow enough time.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's so highly guarded that they don't want to release any of it in advance.
Good.
And then there's one other like kind of interesting reason, and that is that so when something that's so hyped and popular comes out, so that people don't take the book, turn to the back and see, am I in this?
Oh.
They want you to read the whole book and not say, oh, well, this person is in the index in 20 different places. It's one that's not mentioned. Um,
Oh.
Kind of an interesting thing there with memoirs specifically.
So, I mean, quite strange reasons, isn't it? I mean, one always feels that the book, of course, the content matters the most. The editing comes,
Mhm.
into the act, and it can always make your book more of yourself once a good editing is done. And the indexing, which I really feel that all these three constitute to make a very good book. Is definitely, and
Mhm.
as you said, Amy, there are reasons to say not to have an index. No time to do it is the most common probably, but this is interesting, memoirs especially, where people want to check if he is mentioned, he or she is not mentioned, then okay, maybe I can pass that on. Something of that kind. Okay, so what are the common pitfalls to avoid when creating an index? What is it?
Um, the index entries themselves need to be concise
Uh-huh.
and formatted sort of similar. Ideally, when we are making the first word of a subheading,
Mhm.
you want to use the gerund form of a verb, which is the ing form. So, finding, cooking, treating, those kinds of words,
Mhm.
kind of active verbs. And you also need to make sure that the index entries are not too wordy or complicated.
Mhm. Okay, sure. So in terms of any particular project which comes to your mind, which had a very, very tight deadline, it was something to be done, which you knew that it's very tough to deliver. So how did you handle that pressure?
Um, there there are times when I can't get started immediately on a new project because of something else is pressing, and
Sure.
so I don't have as much time as I'd like.
Mhm.
Um, I I do think that cookbooks are the fastest type of book for me to index, so I can
Mhm.
do those most quickly. My record for that was an insane turnaround time of 2 hours
Oh my God.
for a longtime client,
Oh God.
because he was so late in getting it to me, and I
Okay.
turned that thing out really really fast. Um, but that's the exception.
Yeah.
Um, if I have a really difficult week or a really difficult project, I like to remind myself that by a particular date on that grid calendar of mine, that project will be over. I will never see it again. If possible, I like to streamline other things like running errands or making dinner or something like that. So
Sure.
I have this philosophy that if they have a rush job, the client is going to pay a rush fee that covers getting food out for a few days.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. 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 I
Yeah,
think it's all about how one handles it, isn't it? At that point of time.
yeah.
Yeah. So as a book, when one looks at a book, normally you see a great design and you immediately think about who is the designer, that comes to your mind. When you read an author's name and it communicates something to you. So as an indexer, what do you see and how do you think it is perceived in the industry as an indexer? How are indexers perceived really?
Um, I like to think that we're valued members of the team. Most of us are freelancers, and production editors tend to have a list of freelancers that they use for various roles: editors, designers, indexers.
Mhm.
Um, so fortunately, I've gotten a number of good referrals across the publishing houses. I work for about 20 different production editors, and then sometimes I do work for authors themselves or
Mhm.
for just some independent publishers.
Sure.
Um, Much of the time, we are quite invisible. There are a few exceptions to that. There are times when my name is in the book,
Mhm.
but much of the time it is not, and that's fine with me. I know that I'm providing a valuable service.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah.
So having spent so much time, 20 long years into this industry, if anyone wishes to start his career as a book indexer, I mean, what would be your advice? What would you tell him or her to do?
Um, I'd recommend a well-regarded training course, first of all. So
Mhm.
the UC Berkeley indexing course is very strong. The American Society for Indexing offers a training course. Uh, the course I took through the USDA is no longer available, but there are also some good books out there. So there's the first edition of Nancy Mulvaney's indexing books, if
Mhm.
you want to learn more about the process. But I think new indexers really need to get the personal feedback from an instructor or a mentor as they're learning.
Sure.
Um, Many indexers come to indexing late in their professional career. A lot of them started in library sciences or in the sciences in general.
Mhm.
Um, You'd be surprised, but I'm actually one of the younger indexers
Wow,
in the
that's good.
American Society for Indexing. Um,
Good to know.
yeah. Uh, so there's a lot of competition for work, and I think one reason is that indexers tend to stay in the business, could be well into their 70s and beyond. Um,
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
they don't necessarily retire, so there is some competition. It's
Yeah.
not going to be easy to make a living for a while.
Yeah.
Um, as far as traits of a good indexer, as I said, there are plenty of indexers that have a library science background, but that is by no means a requirement. It's solitary work. You have to be okay with that. You're working alone, you're making decisions alone. You may not talk to people. As I said, any communication I have is almost always through email, or a LinkedIn message. I'm not talking to people. I'm not having meetings with people.
Sure.
Now, of course, this isn't how all indexers work, but it's a lot of being alone and just reading on your own and working on the computer. So you have to be prepared for that.
Sure, sure. I think it's an open industry, as you keep saying, it's largely a freelance-based kind of an industry. So lots of competition, I'm sure, but that's where the quality also stand out very easily. Someone who is delivering consistently. I think the work speaks for itself more than anything. So yeah. So any on a lighter side, any humorous incident or something which really got you into splits and that, oh, what is this happening as far as indexing is concerned? Any incident which comes to your mind?
Well, yeah. This didn't have an impact on me because I had already completed the index, but a few years ago, this
Mm-hmm.
big publisher had an order of cookbooks and they were printed in China. And this is a highly promoted book. They already had the book signing scheduled, everything. So when the book is finally printed, it's like 6 months after I finished the index, the entire shipping container sank into the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh my God.
And every last copy was gone.
Oh
And
God.
they had to wait months for the books to be reprinted.
Oh my God. Oh,
Yeah, I
oh,
couldn't
that,
believe it. It actually made NPR news.
the books went to the fishes, literally.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. They're still there.
Okay. So I'll skip the next one, but I'll come to what has been the most rewarding project of a book indexer, which you've got really. Something which you really
Um,
enjoyed, not just financially, but very satisfying in terms of all your, efforts, and it just worked out very beautiful. Something which comes to your mind.
I don't know if this is the most rewarding, but I know I really enjoy the books that use a lot of popular culture terms. So there was this book called The Secrets of Character, and it was all about developing a likable character for films and TV. And it was so well done, and they used all these terrific examples
Mhm.
of dialogue and parts of screenplays, and it was just so much fun.
Sure.
Um, the the Chuck Klosterman books, a lot of fun. There was a really interesting book that I did. It was about a scandal in the pharmaceutical industry, and
Hmm.
it was like investigative journalism, really interesting. And then I had another one about uh, overturning a murder conviction. Just like really interesting things.
Sure.
I learned so much from what I do.
Mm.
It's fun.
Yeah. So, here again, Amy, when you read certain type of books, by an author who comes up with multiple books, you get you get the author's style of reading. So, is there something which, you have an indexing style, and you may get different varieties of people, telling you to adopt to the different genres. So, how do you handle that really? Because it's all different genres, isn't it? Sometimes.
Well, the books I work on are different, but they're all written for lay people.
Uh-huh.
So really, it's most important to use the language that the author uses.
Hmm.
And if I work on a number of different learning and development training books, they're all going to use a lot of the same language, so it's repeated. Um, but I think most important, um, that I'm using natural language and the terms that are in the book.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crucial. Yeah. So what do you think is the future of book indexing? This is more relevant in terms of the technologies which are, coming up. It's looking very crazy. though you said last 20 years have not much has changed really, but how do you see the next 20 years probably?
Um, there's the development of what's called embedded indexing, which is indexing that kind of moves along with the book file. It's not really a separate document, and that's a little bit more appropriate for other kinds of books that I don't work on. So I'm not really into that, but that is one area that is under development. There's a lot of software development in that area.
Sure.
Of course, there's AI,
Absolutely.
and there's some real copyright issues when it comes to AI.
Yes.
So as far as the taking book content, you can't do that. You can't just take all the book content and then put it out there again.
Sure.
And likewise, if an actual index is generated by AI, kind of like a piece of artwork generated by AI, it cannot be copyrighted.
Hmm.
And that can become a problem because as it is now, an index is copyrighted.
Sure.
So it's unknown. I mean, right now, it's not like my job is being taken over.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting time right now, you know?
Yeah. I think things will only get evolved, slowly, slowly. I mean, all the AI stuff
Right.
and is coming up. I'm sure things are going to get settled down very soon. So, have you come across any book which you did, indexing for, which personally you were not very convinced about the content, but you had to do it? So, how did you handle it really? Or is it just a professional task which you took it up and submitted and that's it?
Um, of course, I've come across things that I don't agree with personally, or it
Yeah.
is controversial.
Mm.
Um, and and part of what a good indexer is remembering that you're not rewriting the text. You're making the text accessible to the reader.
So,
And there are times when I wonder how an author has written this book that is so either scattered or repetitive. You know, where was the editor in this? But my job is to use the terms and the concepts in the book and organize that information into a meaningful structure.
so,
Um, so sometimes it's the content that's not my cup of tea.
mm-hmm,
Sometimes it's the mechanics, but fortunately, the
mm-hmm,
majority of books that I get are reasonable or even interesting. There was one book that was I would probably say that the most difficult book that I had to deal with in my career. And it wasn't that it was so long or something so complicated. Just the subject matter was so graphic and so um, stomach turning that I hated it.
so,
But again, once that time is up on my calendar, I don't see that project again, and
absolutely.
that's that.
And I think that's the hallmark of a professional, really. Once you take it up and you submit your work, that's about it, really. So, on a lighter side, to end this wonderful conversation, Amy, had you not been an indexer, what possible alternate career you could have chosen?
Um, well, I love to learn, and I am a perpetual student.
So,
I'm always taking classes. I've taken 7 classes in forensic science, for example.
wonderful.
You know, I
Wow.
take courses in all sorts of things all the time,
Oh my.
and so I also think it would be really exciting to work in a hospital,
Mm,
or as something like a private investigator, um, a paralegal, a teacher. I'm interested in a lot of things,
wow.
but mainly I like to keep learning.
So,
I'd like to be an expert in a lot of things. I'm kind of fun to play trivia games with.
wow. Super. You know what comes to my mind before we conclude this, Amy? Your journey has been absolutely wonderful. You are a thorough professional. You have chosen a career which you love. You're doing some wonderful work, and I'm very keen to know when would we see Amy Hall as the book author someday. I'm sure a book in your name would be coming soon. Any last thoughts on that?
Um, I have written a chapter in a book on it's on an indexing topic,
Wow.
but not that any layperson would come across that. And I've written several articles about things like that. I am a cook myself.
Uh-huh.
So my husband is always telling me that I should be writing a cookbook or something, but I don't like to give away my own recipes. So I don't think we're going to see a book by me too soon. I do find something like ghostwriting kind of interesting though. So maybe that is something I might be interested in looking into someday.
Awesome. Awesome. That sounds great. On that note, Amy, thank you so much. It was absolutely a delight to, talk to you. Now, I have personally learned a lot, and I'm sure this, video session where we are going to share with a lot of people. There are people, there's gentlemen listening to us as well. So they will benefit. There's lots to learn from you, Amy. I thank you on behalf of Book My Story. That's a publishing arm and self-publishing arm and book creation services business. What I do. And you gave me a nice hint, someday probably ghostwriting might be something which you would like to take. So there's lots which we both can discuss ahead as well. Thank you so much, Amy. Have a lovely day
Thank
ahead.
you. Thank you. This was fun.
And thank
Take
you,
care.
Amy. Bye bye.
Bye.